Hi everybody, it's Gail from Gail's Bookish Things. I had this idea that I wanted to share with you, and that was to show you how I made my original traveler's notebook. I really wish I would have kept it. It started to fall apart after a couple years. I guess it was a year and a half. Started looking a little beat up. So that was when I took the plunge to a leather notebook. But my very first one, my husband was traveling. I was kind of at home needing something to work on. I do have a family, but they were bigger and doing their own thing, and I wanted a craft project. So I looked up on how to make a traveler's notebook from vinyl placemats from the dollar store. This was my first project, and I really liked it because once I was done and I had painted the cover and did the strings and everything, it felt like a real traveler's notebook in a way. And when I say real, I mean leather, but that's fine. It doesn't have to be leather. They have vinyl ones, there's paper ones, a sturdy type paper. But this vinyl one was a good imitation for how it would feel to hold a leather traveler's notebook. At the time, I wanted a really chunky one. This is the chunkiest traveler's notebook I have right now. This is a Speckled Fawns Rustic Kodiak. I love this. It's thicker and it has a reinforced spine. And my original one included dimensions that would let me have several inserts in the traveler's notebook. So the reason I wanted to show this was that I've been talking to some new YouTube friends, and they were talking about not being sure what kind of traveler's notebook they wanted to get. And so I was thinking maybe it would be helpful to others to see what I did. It's certainly not an original idea, kind of have my own twist on it, but it's really something you could probably see also somewhere else on YouTube. But I wanted to show it for the people that might be watching here. The way I decided to do this vinyl placemat one was to take measurements. So on a standard size traveler's notebook, you're generally going to have something around this. This is about 4 3/4 by 9. This brown one is about 4 3/4 by 8 3/4. It can vary slightly, of course. The main thing is that it's housing your inserts okay. So what I decided to do was to demonstrate making a traveler's notebook that is about this size. This is a thinner one. This can hold more. It's a little bit wider. I have about, let's see, what do I have in here now? I just have 2 in here now. But recently I've had more in there, and I've had wider, fuller T-ends. As you can see, if I bend this paper around here, that fits just right. So if you want to try this project, you need to take into consideration the spine thickness. How many traveler's notebooks are you going to have in there? Again, to show you this, my front covers and back covers are going to be comparable. The Start Bay one is just a little bit taller. You can see if I line them up. Doesn't make a huge difference when it's holding the inserts, but obviously this one's a lot thicker. So keep in mind, how thick do you want it? How many inserts do you want to have in there at a time? This has 3 holes. This has 4. Yeah, 4 holes. There's 2 threads here and here. There's 3 and 3 here. And like I said, my first one was designed to hold more. So your front and your back cover will be the same, and then you need to just add on the the width of the spine. An easy way to do that, or was for me, the easiest way was to just kind of, well, let me just show you. Open it up. If you have one that you're copying, I guess you can't open it if you're wanting to make one to try it, but what I did here was to open this up. So I have about 9, it's like 8 7/8 and it's about almost 10 1/4. I wrote those dimensions right here. So I'm doing 10 1/4 wide, and I'm doing 8 7/8 tall. That could be a good starting point if you want to play around with this, but just add a little bit more to your width if you want to go with a thicker spine. I think the one that I bought from this one company was like 12 inches wide. It was made to hold up to 10 inserts. Okay, I'm back. I had just taken a quick break. So basically, you won't have a TN to measure on if you don't already have a TN and you're wanting to try it out. So I'm just recommending that you start with a 10 1/4 or up to 10 3/4 for a smaller TN, one that'll hold 3 or 4 comfortably, and then make it about 8 7/8 tall. So that is your first step. Basically, I would recommend cutting a pattern. You don't have to cut a pattern. You can measure exactly onto your vinyl placemats. These are the real bendy ones. It's not that crisper type plastic like that you might have a stencil for. It's very soft. Oh man, I should have taken these off ahead of time. Well, it doesn't matter. Don't you hate it when they do those labels like that? Oh, it aggravates me. I should make them where they'll come off. If you're comfortable with just measuring directly onto your placemat, do that. Also, wanted to just say real quick, if you find a cover that you like, you can just have that be your cover. When I originally made these, I just picked up 2. I didn't pay too much attention to the design. I picked out ones I liked just because I wanted to, but it's not going to be seen unless you choose for it to be. But you could certainly do that. If you find something cute, go for it, and you can eliminate one of the steps. But I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to place this here. There's not enough to do 2 TNs on one placemat, unless maybe you were doing something like this, field notes size, or maybe something smaller. But for this standard / narrow size, just you're going to need 2. You may have, and then see, I'm outlining it, trying to stretch out my fingers so it doesn't slide while I'm doing this. You may want to push it right into the corner so you can have a rounded corner if you want. You can also round it later. I don't know if I'm going to do that yet or not. I'm not sure if it will go in my corner rounder or not, and I don't want to mangle it up if it won't. So this is just a really super fun project, and it also lets you get a handle on how a traveler's notebook feels if you want to get one. And if you're considering buying a leather one, that even on the cheaper sites it's still going to be a bit of money, this is a good way to try it out. So see, I have my first one. Don't need to worry about that pesky old label. And I am going to do the same thing here. I'm coming down close to the corner, but not all the way. I don't want to get the rounded corner in personally for me, because I'm not sure I can duplicate the same corner on the side. I'm sure this is pretty easy to cut through. It's been like a couple years, like I said, since I made my original one, but it shouldn't be a problem with a decent enough scissors to cut it and round it. But I'm just going to do it square for now, like I just said. Okay, so that is step 1. Make your pattern and then measure it out. There was a time when I would have had numerous ones of these at home already. I've since gotten rid of a lot of them. I had a lot of cute kids ones, and they've outgrown that. So if you want to do this and you can't get to the store, see if you have some of these bendy vinyl placemats already around. And I guess it was kind of a no-brainer. Of course you can cut through this because you have to cut the pattern. So cut that out carefully, obviously. Try to stay on the lines the best you can, and I only say that because I'm like a kindergartner when it comes to cutting. I always manage to go crooked. It doesn't have to be totally perfect, so don't stress if you kind of it gets a little bit angled. That's not a problem because we are going to sew them together, and then we can trim it up once they're sewn together. When this is done with the sewing, it'll have kind of some of the typical things that you can find on a traveler's notebook. Some of the more classic models, would just be bent like this, and they would have the strings in them. But what I want to do, okay, let me just say, you could do it like this. You could just stop with this and poke your holes in. It's quite thin that way, but it would work, and you would be able to feel how that is in hand. You can get your inserts and put them in. You can make inserts and put them in, and you can just try out this method before investing money in it. I think it's a really smart idea, and I think it's a really smart idea too if you are wanting to try a different size TN that you haven't tried before. I got a personal size TN made by a really great company, and their quality of work was wonderful. They were really good to work with. But I should have tried it out a little bit longer before I ordered the actual leather one. And I should have thought my decision through a little bit more, because I ended up ordering one that only would house 2 or 3 inserts. And I decided to use that as a wallet, and it's been a little bit of a struggle to have it work as a wallet. It does work, and I'm enjoying it, but I should have tried it out first, and I think I might have opted to request that they make it a little bit wider. And it was an unusual size, and they didn't even have a pattern for it. So even though I tried very much to be careful, I'm still seeing that these are just slightly different than one another. But like I said, it is okay because we're going to sew it together and then trim it up. I suppose you could do this with a heavyweight hand sewing needle. I don't have, well, I may have one, but I don't really feel like doing that. And I do have a sewing machine. If you don't have a sewing machine, I think what you could try at this point is to glue this together and make sure that the glue you select will hold these 2 pieces together securely. I don't know if double-sided tape might work. I wouldn't use a glue gun because you're going to get big clumps of glue that will peel off, but some kind of strong adhesive, or sew it. So we have cut the pattern. Let's just review a minute. I don't know where I put my pattern. I'm looking in front of me. Here it is. Cut your pattern. Trace the pattern onto the placemat. Cut out the pieces, and step 4 is to sew them together. I'm just going to have my sewing machine on a regular tension, and about just a straight stitch. I don't know, just whatever you would probably sew a hem with if you were making a shirt or curtains or apron or something. Not a super tight one. I'm trying to see what I have mine set on now. It's about at 4. Anyway, however you choose to do it. If you're familiar with sewing, just go for it. Sew it whatever you want, close to the edge. Now, you can see here, I hope, or maybe my edges aren't exactly the same, so just sew with the smaller piece close to the edge. So if you look at my one here, it looks like it's about, let's measure. Let's see if I can even figure this out. I want to say it's about 2 or 3 millimeters. No, sorry, it's about, 3 or 4 millimeters or something. About 4 millimeters, I'm guessing. just taking a quick glance at that, maybe 1/8 of an inch, something like that. Again, it doesn't matter too much, and this is a trial size, but you may like it and you may end up using it for a long time like I did. Then I finally decided to get a couple, one at a time, but get some that were made by somebody else. You can see it's a bigger stitch here, but it's still close to the edge. So try to get fairly close to the edge, but give yourself a little bit of room so you can see your stitching. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this up at my sewing machine, and I'll come back after I've sewn it, and then I will show you that, and then we'll probably do the trimming and puncturing of the holes and so forth on a next video, so this doesn't get too long and you can do it a couple steps at a time, a little bit bite-size steps. Right above where this camera is, I have a shelf and I have these clips. So I'm not going to pin it because I don't want to put holes in it. You know, this will show a hole. So I'm just going to clip it to kind of help keep it in place. I think you might be able to use double-sided tape to help hold it in place while you're sewing if you are concerned about it slipping. Also, just a little side note, you could cut out a pocket and you could stitch on the pocket before you stitch these together. That may be something I want to do. So on your front cover, cut out your pocket. So like I'm thinking I would do it about halfway, or maybe even do an angled one. I really kind of like that idea. So you can cut out whatever size pocket you want, stitch it on to the front piece, whichever piece you designate as being the front piece. You know, I don't know if we could sew it through all three. I wouldn't try to do that. I'm thinking the needle might break, so that's why I'm hesitating here. Go ahead and sew on a pocket if you choose to do that. Give yourself enough room on the side here so that you can still do your outline stitching, which is going to connect the two pieces, but sew on the pocket before you do that and give yourself enough room there. I'll come back after the sewing and then we will talk about the next step. I have not yet sewn it. I was cutting out my pocket and a thought occurred to me that you could also cut a pocket out and just stitch it around for the decoration of the stitching, and then try adhering it to your front after you've stitched the two pieces together. That might work. I am not familiar with enough glues to know if that would hold, so that's my hesitation. But if you want to test it on your scraps and see if some kind of heavy-duty glue or something that's good with plastics would allow you to glue the pocket on, that would eliminate the sewing part of it. That's one thing to do. And also I just wanted to mention the reason why I'm putting the slick sides together is I believe that the paint will stick better to this rougher side, and I don't want to have to worry about covering up a design that might show through on the paint. When I made my first one, it looked just like this, and I painted it like a rusty clay color, and then I did splotches of green and turquoise and orange on it, just kind of in little strips, like random patches. I don't know what I'm going to do with this one, but I know that the glue stuck pretty well to that, and I did a couple coats. So just think about pocket, possibly gluing it on after you put the stitch on, but test it first if you want a front pocket. Otherwise, sew the front pocket to your cover piece, front cover piece, before you sew both pieces together. So I will be back after sewing. Alrighty, I am back, and here is my stitched traveler's notebook with placemats. I did go ahead and do the pocket. Whoops. And as you can see, I had a little trouble with the corner. I am standing and sewing. I will say that as my excuse for this sloppy sewing here, but in a way I don't mind that because I've kind of seen that on things lately, like that kind of what would you call that besides sloppy? Random or just sort of carefree look or something. I've seen that on things, so that's not bothering me too much. Plus I'll probably go and paint this. I'm planning on painting this with acrylic paints. So it should look something like this. So you have the two decorative sides facing each other, unless you're opting to use that as your cover design. And then you just need to go back and trim off any threads. I already did that on my pocket. And again, I sewed the pocket onto here before I sewed the two pieces together. And as we just mentioned, you can also try gluing that, but I will not, I'm not going to try that. I just wanted to go ahead and sew it on, but you can give it a whirl if that appeals to you. You can see there's just a little bit of overlap here where the behind cover piece is sticking out. So I'm going to trim this and trim it down here, just those couple of spots. I could do an X-Acto knife, but I don't always have the best luck with that. So I'm just going to trim it with my scissors. Then we will talk about hole placement. Let's go ahead and trim this. This will just take a second. Maybe. We hope it just takes a second. I do want to say too, if you feel like you have too deep of a seam and your lines are straight though, go ahead and trim it off if you want to. But like I've said before, it's kind of like cutting hair. You take a little bit off and then you keep taking more off, and then before you know it, you've got more off than you want to. This is not my favorite scissors, but it seems to be doing okay. So just trying to get real close there. There we go. I think that's probably good enough. See, it's just a little sliver of overhang from the underneath piece. There's a little bit on this corner. So that's just what you want to look for now. Once it's sewn, just kind of clean up the look of the cover. Don't overdo it. If you want the corners rounded, this would be a good time to do it. When you sew that, you know, that might have been something too to round it, but I kind of wanted it, just the straight worked better for me. I didn't want to try to round it because I thought it would end up kind of looking worse. So I'm getting a little bit onto the front cover here, but I am at least evening up both pieces. Got a little close here. Like I said, kindergarten cutting skills. So anyway, that is our first hunk of steps. So we have cut our pattern, trace the pattern onto the placemats or draw it directly on the placemat, cut out your pieces, sew them together, design side together, or glue it if you have a glue that you know will work, trim if necessary, and then I think, you know, you could paint and then puncture the holes, or puncture the holes and then paint, but I think we'll come back next time and puncture it so that when we paint, the paint will go into our string holes and our cover holes. So I will be back next time with step 2. Hope this is a fun thing for you and that you'll enjoy trying making your own traveler's notebook. See you in a little bit.